And young women, you are magnifying this problem by becoming pornography.
The Lord wants all his children to partake of the eternal blessings available in his temple. He has directed what each person must do to qualify to enter his holy house. All requirements to enter the temple relate to personal holiness. To assess that readiness, each person who wants to enjoy the blessings of the temple will have 2 interviews. First, with a bishop, bishopric counselor, or branch president. Second, with a stake or mission president or one of his counselors. In those interviews, several questions will be asked. Some of those questions have recently been edited for clarity. I would like to review them for you now. Are you a full tithe payer?
We are instructed to give unto you the law of chastity, which is that the women of God's kingdom and the men of God's kingdom shall have no sexual relations except with those to whom they are legally and lawfully wedded according to his law. Each of you bring your right arm to the square. You and each of you individually covenant and promise before God, angels, and these witnesses that you will observe and keep the law of chastity as it has been explained to you. Each of you bow your head and say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
They go to the temple along with our 11-year-old young women.
She would be a second wife. She asked this question: would she be able to have her own house? Would she have to live with her husband and his first wife? I just told her to trust the Lord.
Travis Wayne Goodsell. YouTube is specifically designed to protect the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So the video I just did today, yet again, was a cyber terrorist attack by YouTube for improperly claiming that a church conference video is copyright owned by a Spanish-speaking YouTube channel not affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so they flagged it as a copyright violation, but there's no penalties, so you can still see it. But it triggers the algorithm to have me, the bad guy, violating YouTube's policies so that I get less views. So I guess 5 videos per hour, or 5 views per hour, was too much for YouTube to handle. And so they attacked me again. And this has been done before on me, the same thing. And YouTube eventually drops it, but the damage is done because the algorithms lower my view count. This is bullying, harassment by YouTube. And it's something that they use to silence me, to protect the church being false, which is blatantly obvious from that video. Plus, there's also fair use as church content. I linked them to the actual conference video, which it's not a talk because it was the sustaining vote to the church's website and asking YouTube to please finally correct this. Whoever is claiming the copyright is the one violating the copyright. Beam and mote yet again. And so all this month is the Jewish month of Kislev. And as such, there are some historical events that are anniversaries for this month, as well as some traditions which are not understood as prophecies and revelations for this month. Because everybody believes Constantine's first creed of Christianity, which turned all Jewish scriptures into literal histories, rather than prophecies and revelations. And this is it. This is the month of fulfillment. Everything has happened, and yet I'm the only person on the face of the earth that is able to inform the whole world that the prophecies of the Bible are true. They've happened. This is it. And it's because of Christianity that is blinding everybody to this. We instead frame and blame the Jews, just like Brigham did to Joseph Smith. And so, one of the historical events was when the Greeks took over occupation of the Jerusalem temple of the Jews. And the Jews called this the abomination of desolation, because the Greeks tore down the Jewish altar and 10 days rebuilt their altar, on which they all offered pigs. That's the famous one that they did. Infamous. You can be a big pig too. Plus, the Greek practice of utilizing temples for the prostitution of women. Women were not allowed to have property, to run a business, to own land. And so, if a woman is single, divorced, widowed, all alone, nobody to take care of her, the Greeks decided, we'll take care of such women by having them work in the temples, and men can pay to have sex with them. Okay? Now, this is a common theme throughout all of the Jewish scriptures, this concept of prostitution and polluting the temple. As Mary is Parthenon, which means temple prostitute from the Greek. And you thought it was virgin. Nope, temple prostitute. That's why she's pregnant when Joseph buys her at the temple. But you don't read that in the Gospel of Matthew, because the first creed of Christianity, turning it all literal history with a new religion, replacing the Jews, didn't like that. And so they changed it by leaving it out of their collection of Jewish usurped documents. And so it can't be true, because it's the Roman period. The Romans did not occupy the Jerusalem temple. They only had guards around the walls, because the Jews had taken back their temple in the Maccabean revolt, and thus why Hanukkah is celebrated every year for the Jews, in remembrance of setting in order the house of God. Section 85, verse 7. Joseph Smith is prophesying that it's going to be this church. Yep. This church does the exact same thing, but it's far worse. because it was an inside coup that is framing and blaming Joseph. But it was Brigham Young who altered and added to Joseph Smith's temple rituals. And many an ex-foe nevermo perpetuate the frame and blame by Brigham Young on Joseph. It was Brigham Young who added the creation story and the garden story and added the Freemason name, signs, and tokens and mark the underwear of the symbol of your bondage to the covenant paths in the temple. That was the abomination of desolation for the ritual changes. Joseph's temple ritual was only washing and anointings. And then, prostitution. Section 119 of the Doctrine and Covenants, that was only in Brigham Young's Doctrine and Covenants, 1844. Nobody else knew of it. So nobody else had it in their Doctrine and Covenants. So it just magically appeared for Brigham Young only in his only Doctrine and Covenants. Because other Mormons split off who did not want to follow Brigham Young. That's why Brigham Young set a trap for Joseph by having he and his missionaries going around telling everybody it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Book of Mormon is another testament of Jesus Christ. We're Christian. So that after they murder Joseph Smith, all the converts only know Brigham Young as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Framed and blamed to sabotage and destroy Joseph's religion. Thus, the abomination of desolation. And Section 119 was his secret financial operation that paid the Judas price to have Joseph murdered, as well as other abominations, as the secret band of Danites, as they called themselves. And so, this financial operation of crime that was practiced in a secret combination behind Joseph's back was then turned into the Scripture. That's why Section 119 is a complete violation of all Scriptures, not just the Bible with Malachi and Joseph of Egypt with the storehouses, but also the Book of Mormon, no priestcraft, and Joseph Smith, who refers to Malachi and also bishops having storehouses. And so Section 117 is a forged document. Notice the date, in which Section 85, verse 7 of the One Mighty and Strong is a prophecy in a personal letter to W. Phelps. That's why Joseph did not have it published in 1835. Brigham published it with Section 117 the year before he died. And so thus we know Section 117 is a forged document, because Joseph Smith did not assign Newell K. Whitney to be the bishop and add him on Diamond, because Section 116 is a forged document. The church has put out the Joseph Smith papers so that we can all see the evidence firsthand for ourselves. And yet, the church, having put out the Joseph Smith papers, nonetheless had new saints' history books written, and in the saints' history book, the church still again frames and blames Joseph for polygamy and also adultery. That was what the Danites were doing in their little secret combination Nicolaitan band, which is far worse than adultery, by the way, if you know about the tradition of the Nicolaitan band. because I've been doing the videos for you. And so in the state of Utah, it is illegal to practice prostitution. It's Utah Code 76-10-1302. You cannot pay for sex. You can't pay the prostitute directly. You can't pay the prostitute through a pimp. It is illegal in the state of Utah. And yet every single Mormon is practicing it. This is more of a scandal than Governor Cox endorsing the pyramid MLM Ponzi scheme of doTERRA. Just unbelievable. The church does it, so it can't be illegal. When you go on your mission. A pyramid MLM Ponzi scheme is where you pay this fraud of a company to recruit others to pay the fraud of a company. And you have to put up all the money to go out and recruit others. All I have to do is say Mr. Mac, and you all know that it's true. It's just so sick and wrong. And not a single Mormon knows and understands it, because you are all born and raised into this criminal operation that they tell you is Jesus' plan of happiness for you. That you must obey or you're the enemy. The bite model can bite me because of how incomplete it is. Your first clue of how wrong it is that it was written by a psychologist who is doing the exact same thing as the bite model that he created. That's why he knows about it and left out certain key things that would expose him as being a part of it. That's why the church embraces psychology through family services. The other big scandal, because of the prostitution of Section 119, as it is number 10 on the worthiness questions, yeah, you have to pay up to be worthy in this church. And for prostitution, you have to pay up to be worthy to have sex with only a Mormon girl. Mormon girls are the prostitutes for the Pimp Daddy Corporation. Pimp Diddy Corporation? And even in the temple ceiling, only the woman gives herself to the man, whereas the man receives the woman, and the woman receives the man, but the man is not given to the woman. It's a distinct thing that you need to understand pre-Emancipation Proclamation in the United States. The church continues to have women as sex slaves to their husbands. That's why it was obey your husband in the law of obedience. And you thought you no longer obey your husband anymore. These guys are evil. They deceive you with word manipulations, changing of definitions, diverting you away from what they're actually doing. So like Oaks, for example, even though it's the whole church that vilifies porn, Oaks came out and said, young women, you are pornography if you dress immodestly. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as pornography as images, idols of nudity and sexuality. That is an evangelical creation after they lost their Supreme Court argument in 1900 to force the whole public school system to teach the Christian-occupied Bible as literal history in the classrooms. So they went on a whole idol-worshiping frenzy. This is evil, that is evil. This is good, that's okay to do. And they just skyrocketed in people joining evangelicalism. That would eventually become televangelism, and then the megachurch evangelicals, and dear God. And now we're learning about the fruits of evangelicalism is having the pastor recording his wife having sex with the pool boy. And they still stay in the church. And the prosperity gospels, pay me now, Jesus is gonna murder me if I don't buy another yacht and a jet plane and a new wardrobe and a mansion. Pay now. If you pay now, I'll bless you live on television. You'll be the sale of indulgences will set you free. Religion is a big scam under Christianity. Likewise with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There are just so many talks in conference and in lessons telling Mormons tithing comes first. You must pay. If you're hungry and you're starving, you don't have the money to pay for food after you pay tithing, pay your tithing first. Can't pay your bills, pay your tithing first. And that's a poor business model, because a clever business strategy would be to have people continually pay you. But if you drain them as a source of income, you don't get any more income from them. Weird. Why would you do that? You know, the pyramid Ponzi multi-level marketing scheme can only last until you can't get any more converts, recruits. There are only so many people on the earth, and there are only so many people who will fall for your scam. And so once you reach that max, that's it. You're done. You need to pack it up and start another one. And so yes, doTERRA and USANA and others do also have a business of products to sell. But they're so high priced that nobody in their right mind would actually buy them, when they can get them cheaper and better quality through other sources. But the fact of having a recruitment automatically makes it a pyramid, multi-level marketing Ponzi scheme. You can't have that at all in a business. There can be no recruiting at all for a business. The only recruiting is for the Army, Navy, Air Force Reserves, National Guard. But they have a recruiter office, and they don't, it's different. That's the legal way to do it. But right here in the state of Utah, the capital of pyramid, MLM, Ponzi schemes, following the example of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Every Mormon knows Mosiah chapter 29 about the evils of King Noah. Every Mormon knows about Helaman chapter 6, about secret combinations. Don't play dumb with me. So the other part of this that the church is involved with is even worse. Utah Code 765308.1. Human trafficking for sexual exploitation. That is directly connected to prostitution. Sex trafficking is paying for sex with a prostitute, but taking that prostitute from one state to another state or out of the country. So thus your Russian brides, yeah, that's technically sex trafficking because you're paying the Russian bride operator to purchase these Russian women who've been kidnapped from their family, held hostage, to be auctioned off to the world to purchase them. And a Utah, I think it was last year or earlier this year, who went to Turkey to purchase a bride and brought her home to Utah, and then she claimed rape. Old man, Mormon, his whole life, now involved in sex trafficking and raping of his prostituted wife. That's why it is not good for man to be alone, but to exploit men in this church by telling them they can't even have their natural thoughts to procreate. That is evil and of the devil. And that we have to pray, read our scriptures, go to the temple, sing a hymn to not think. Even my childhood peers told me, as I didn't understand what they were talking about, but I do now, that causes within a man to be more aggressive and frustrated, to which he becomes supposedly a better athlete, whereas women make men weak. Yeah, that's why white supremacists also tell men in their gang not to masturbate. Or if they do allow masturbation, it is under strict rules and guidelines, like having to be so many feet away from the woman you're masturbating to, and just, oh my hell. Just sick and wrong. And so this church, yeah, you can't even think about it. You can't date as a teenager all alone. You have to do group dating because necking and petting is evil. And I had no idea what necking and petting was, because necking, Really? Kissing a woman on her neck? With hickeys? Which were a popular thing at Rick's. Lots of women wore turtlenecks. It wasn't winter time, it was summer. And petting? What? So if I pet my animal, that's a sin and it's sexual? What? I don't understand. And then right before my mission, because of Benson's talk to the youth of the noble birthright, all bishops ordered missionaries to read the miracle of forgiveness before they go on their mission. And then there's that chapter with a whole long list of needing to reference your dictionary to understand the sexual sin that you have no clue of what it is anyway. He's teaching us what kinds of things to do, to not do. Which is why the bishops in this church have been exposed of getting sexually graphic with little kids in this church for their worthiness interviews, along with forcing kids to pay tithing, to not have sex, not have sexuality, and not even think of it. That orgasms for women, evil. They have it every month at least. What do you think the menstruation cycle is? But this miseducation is sexual abuse. And all Mormons are victims of this crime of sexual abuse by this church. And so human trafficking is where you hook up at BYUs with somebody from out of state. So, I too was a victim of this, as I went to Rick's College, and my wife also went to Rick's College. She's half Canadian and was living in Canada when she came to Rick's. Her parents, likewise, sex trafficking. He was from Canada, she was from Texas, met at BYU, gave birth to the one who was my wife there at the Provo Hospital. Probably the highest per capita of babies born in the world at that hospital. All of the babies are sex trafficked. Babies of sex trafficked women. And so, yeah, it's a thing that is a celebratory thing in the church. To get married in a temple, and family gets together, and celebrations, and then babies are born. But it's all under the guise of this criminal operation. And if you think, well, the church, it's a religion, and so, yeah, you kind of have to pay the church. No. You're missing the whole point. You have to pay. It's not an option to pay. And it's for worthiness. You cannot have anything involving sexuality until you marry only a Mormon girl in the Mormon temples and thus be worthy to then have sex. And the church also tried to control what kind of sex you had, which was only to have babies. And it will come back again in the millennium, which we're still waiting for Jesus. Nelson prophesied the revealed date of in 1 week from conference. We're still waiting for Jesus to show. Oops. But nonetheless, also, one thing that the church will not reveal to you, and is a super sacred secret that they never wanted you to ever know, and that's what's called Articles of Incorporation. In 1887, the United States of America shut down Brigham Young's Corporation of the President. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Oops, I leaked the information. And so that's how we knew that Brigham Young finally incorporated the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1852. That's the formation and start of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Did not exist before, even though the church lies and denies. And so, after the United States shut it all down as a criminal operation, along with the Perpetual Immigration Fund, utilized from Section 119 on tithing, the church continued to lie and deceive Mormons by thinking that the church is still running and operational. That still has the name, it's still true. The United States backed off. No, they lied. None of the presidents from Wilford Woodruff to Heber J. Grant were legitimate religious leaders. There was no incorporated church. It's gone. They never reincorporated the church. It's gone. November 26, 1923, Heber J. Grant finally decided to pull the big con again on Mormons. He had just come out with a new Doctrine and Covenants in which he got rid of the doctrine called the Lectures on Faith. And you've probably heard about the Arizona woman who did her master's thesis on the secret meeting of the intellectuals, who are not very intellectual, who were concerned that the church history wasn't true. It's Jewish, not literal history Christian. See, they're not that smart. But nonetheless, so Heber J. Grant, after conference that year in 1923, forms the Corporation of the President. Of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But the members of the former Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints no longer have authority. They are without authority and without authority to have any decisions or say in the church. So when Mormons protest the church leaders, you have no authority over them. They're not going to listen to you. Build bridges of relationships of trust. Get out of here. Don't tell us to have worthiness question interviews that are not sexually explicit. Get out of here. You're excommunicated, Bishop. Kate Kelly, don't you tell us that women need to be treated better. You're excommunicated. Do you now understand? You cannot make change within the church. They won't let you. This says you have no authority to do so. If you don't like the church, they're not going to change for you, little Nemo. Sensitive snowflake thinking he can make changes for the church and then gets excommunicated and he cries about it. Oh, why did I do that to me? Dumbass kid. You gotta do your research, people. Otherwise you miss this stuff. And so Mormons are chattel. That's it. And you're supposed to be funded through this corporation for your religion. That's what they say. And yet, they won't. They have the church news flooded to prove they're true with all the charity to corporations around the world and to governments around the world, not to the members. And so, south of the border, for example, nobody goes to church anymore. Because they can't afford to go to church. And the church won't use their hoarded trillions of dollars to pull them out of poverty so that they can give to the church in tithing and other vending machine operations. The church likewise is all about making money, and is purposely doing all they can to prevent further money from coming in by neglecting the poor. See, I'm tying it all together. And so this sex trafficking at BYU's is based on this corporation model. Prostitution is based on the corporation model. The whole thing is a criminal operation, a sex crime operation. And Tim Ballard has been a big part of that. And I need to take a station identification break and I'll come back. So in the state of Utah, we have had numerous scandals with our government and the AG's office and police, not just involving sex scandals, beyond the ones that nobody even considers, prostitution and sex trafficking of Mormons. And so AG Sean Reyes, who is Mormon, and thus is prostituting his wife, if not sex trafficking her also, depending on where they originated from, whether they were, one of them was from a different state than the other, to meet up and get married in the Mormon temple. But regardless, Sean Reyes ran on doing a sting operation in south of the border of a sex trafficking ring, and was easily elected as he was able to demonstrate how he's tough on crime, protecting little girls from sex trafficking, when he himself is prostituting his wife, if not sex trafficking her. He would be involved in other crimes during his tenure. One of them was the big World Cup soccer match where he was bribed by a country that is involved in sex trafficking of little girls. Also with Tim Ballard. As he was working with Tim Ballard, who had the company of trying to stop sex trafficking of little girls. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints supported it. Acting President Ballard approved, had a statement, testimonial on his website. I approve of Tim Ballard. And they knew each other. They got the same last name. They're related. And so they've met before, and sure enough, there are pictures that emerged of President Ballard with Tim Ballard and his family. So M. Russell Ballard knows him. But he got caught as Tim Ballard was being accused of rape of employees. And when you understand the Mormon culture here in Utah of miseducation in regards to sexuality and sex, and all that, and you get these Mormon girls who want to save other Mormon girls from sex trafficking, which I don't know why you need to go out of the state of Utah. It's being done right here in the state of Utah, not just by the church. There are actual escort services right across the street from high schools here in Utah. And nothing's being done with that. You know, finally, the police stopped the one on Redwood Road and 35th South, in which a massage parlor was used for happy endings, but if the person wanted more than a happy ending, they then walked over with them to the hotel right next door. And the police have been there the whole time. I always thought it was because they were wanting to blacklist those who go into the Blue Boutique. Like they used to do to Bob's Magazine downtown. As the cops would send in little kids to try to get Bob in trouble. Dear God, leave him alone. That's where I got my temple shoes from the karate magazine that he sold. But do you understand why the church is so obsessed with porn? It's a diversionary tactic away from the real crime that they themselves are committing. There is nothing wrong with porn. Nothing harmful. Nothing dangerous, nothing addictive. Psychologists are BS. They're bullies lying to you to use you to recruit so that you can be trafficked with psychologists. There must be more regulation of businesses that utilize human beings as sources of income. That's why the medical profession has that in place, so that the medical profession doesn't take advantage of people, like causing people to get sick so that the people have to go back to get the treatment from the medical doctor. Or a medical doctor, rather than looking for the cure of the causation, does symptom management. Can you imagine the horrors if medical profession were only involved in symptom management because the hospitals didn't want to... Don't get me started. Don't get me started. Or police officers, rather than responding to crime, violating our constitutional rights to search and seize without a warrant, giving out traffic violations. That would never be done in the state of Utah. That would be called a quota system. Utah doesn't do that. Crime is rampant in this state alone. And so Ballard, in order to run these sting operations in this sex trafficking business to stop it, must go undercover. And so the women who join are told we need to go undercover, and undercover, we need to pretend that we're married because we might be asked to prove that we're married. Just like a DEA agent, if he goes undercover to stop a drug smuggling ring, the drug smugglers purposely will make sure to find out if you're a cop or not by having you test drugs. So likewise, in the sex trafficking ring, these criminal organizations know to test by making sure that you really are a married couple. Right? Huntsman Jr. and wife, they got busted on Jeffrey Epstein's little black book. Not just Trump, not just P. Diddy. Well, the church does it. It must be okay. And so, yeah, that reminds me of the human trafficker of missionary or people on his mission after the church stopped their adoption agency, the Arizona Mormon, who resumed or started up his adoption agency and kidnapping the women from his mission who were pregnant, bringing them to the States. Had a house in West Valley, Utah, as well as in Arizona. And so Sean Ray has got to be the hero for that one too. Dear God. You can't human traffic. When people are involved, there must be government oversight to make sure that there is no abuse, no crimes being committed. In psychology, they just let go. They won't regulate them. And they give them extra protections to do their abuse on humans. Don't even get me started. Over 100 psychology centers here in Utah for just the teenagers. I'm not sure which is worse, that the psychologists are abusing the teens or that the parents gave up on their kid. So Tim Ballard has to pretend that he's married with these women. He goes to the places to try to meet up with people involved in these sex trafficking rings, where little girls will get kidnapped, etc. And so he needs to go to these places with a woman undercover. And so yes, they've got to give them a lap dance when they're at a place to give a lap dance. And they would have to even teach how to give a lap dance to these innocent, pure Mormon girls who are told that sex is evil. You can't give your husband a lap dance. Evil. You're becoming born. So these naive women are suing because of this, because they don't understand what is required in order to save little girls from sex trafficking from this worldwide ring. It's a worldwide criminal operation of very powerful people, of connected people in this underground. Mormons are just too naive in their little faith bubbles to seriously understand how evil the world is. And so, yeah, 7 women sued Tim Ballard. They thought they were helping. They didn't understand what was required in order to actually save little girls. And there is some concern because Tim Ballard's a guy. But if you're going to get involved in that kind of work, it's not ideal to have a family life. Because if these criminal operators find out that Tim Ballard is undercover, they will find out that he has a family. And then his family will be kidnapped and extorted and sex trafficked as use for compromising Tim Ballard to help them with sex trafficking. So that's why being an undercover cop, being involved in investigations and stings, it's best not to have a family or any kind of ties to any personal relations, because they can be used against you to compromise you. Right, President Biden? He was the one person who has the power to stop these criminal operations from happening, who are extorting him with his son Hunter, and yet he didn't do it. He let them compromise him. He handed over our government to terrorists. But apparently Hunter made a special guest appearance on SNL, I saw this morning. Along with Matt Gaetz. But that was funny. You have a guy pretending to be the church lady, and then Matt Gaetz, aka a female. Hilarious. Just hilarious. It's a trans joke. Hilarious. Okay, so that's the Tim Ballard scandal. As M. Russell Ballard got exposed for handing over tithing stats or listings of the wealthier Mormons who are paying tithing to Tim Ballard's operation to hit them up for funding for his operation. And then, of course, Ballard got away with it by dying. With the curse of Joseph Smith, sun shall be darkened, moon turned to blood, stars fall from heaven. Wow. So cool. Never saw that one coming. But I was kind of wondering, would somebody be dying? We'll wait and find. Oh, Ballard. And with scandal involved as well. Did he keep his covenant path for breaking his covenant path? Oaks and Nelson knows. Yep. Okay? And so every government officer, every person in positions of trust who are Mormon in the state of Utah or elsewhere around the world, the Supreme Court Justice in South Korea, he's Mormon. His wife is being prostituted and sex trafficked in South Korea. I don't know about sex trafficked, but again, if they're not from the same state or country, it's sex trafficking. And so at least prostitution. Mormons around the world are involved in prostitution at the very least. All of them. Everybody must pay tithing to this corporation, because it's not for the payment of the weddings. The weddings technically are free. It's to get into the temple that you have to pay. And so there's other crimes, not just prostitution and sex trafficking that are involved. Extortion of your dead ancestors. You have to pay to save them. You have to pay to save yourself. Many things. You cannot be involved in the pyramid MLM Ponzi schemes unless you pay the church first. Then you are worthy. Those who are on government benefits, you have to pay tithing. You're not supposed to, because that FLDS church got busted for that. but not the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you notice the year after Nelson orders polygamy again, in 2019's temple text, the Law of Chastity, what did the state of Utah do the very next year? They decriminalized polygamy. As Nelson had previously lowered the age of little girls to 11 years old. So yes, there's a whole mega-splitzel thingy going on here. The whole state of Utah is just the most vile of criminal behavior. And so it's sad enough to hear only what the news will cover about the murders and the crimes and abuses that go on in the state of Utah. But to know the real crimes that are going on that are not getting covered by the news because the reporters and the owners of the stations and the whole employment cast are also involved in the crimes and covering up the crimes of the church. This is the culture of criminal behavior in the state of Utah. And so, Sean Reyes is not the only Attorney General who's had some scandals. As we go back to Shurtleff, and even before, but I'm aware of Shurtleff because he committed crimes for the church against me back in 2008. But the one who followed him likewise was involved with the Mormon down south, with the whole boat thing. I was locked up at the time, so I wasn't able to be fully aware of what was going on with that. All I knew is that the FBI refused to hand over the documents that incriminated Shurtleff, and so with the Mormons following Helaman chapter 6 to let the succeeding AG go, and likewise the boat guy. And so therefore there was no case against Shurtleff, especially after the FBI refused to hand over the documents that would incriminate Shurtleff and his involvement in the crimes. So they had to drop the case against Shurtleff, and then Shurtleff sued for $1 million. His wife then divorced him. His prostituted wife divorced him. The sealing is not canceled. Church does not recognize divorce. And so Shurtleff can be a polygamist, now that especially since it's decriminalized. But yeah, I had heard about what he did to his daughter. He locked her up in one of the treatment centers before she turned 18. That was just wrong. Dear God. Because when she turns 18, parents have no claim on their children anymore, unless the children sign over power of attorney. My parents tried to do that to me, but I knew what they were up to. So I just ripped it up and gave it back to them. Dear God. But yeah, they got the idea from Grandma, because they needed to have her sign over power of attorney now that she was entering into Alzheimer's, before she's not competent to sign documents. So I thought, hey, why don't we do this for Travis? Oh my God, get away from me. You are not my parents. I disown you. So evil, the crimes that go on in the state of Utah. So evil among Mormons. And so, we just had an election. As previously, Governor Cox, he also won. There was some scandal involved. He wasn't legitimate. The church endorsed him so that he then was rigged to be legitimate. The Lyman taint hurt Lyman. As he made sure to get the other Lymans out. In revenge. And so, we got Cox again. And likewise, all Mormons are prostituting their wives because of the church, because of the operation that they're running. But to the world, nobody sees it. Because Catholics, for example, I've been to New York on my mission, and Sean McFarland took me to a Catholic cathedral where we wanted to see if he could play the organ. But there was a wedding going on at that time, and so we sat and attended the wedding. And the priest or whoever was in charge of the cathedral went around with the incense. Was putting it on pretty thick today, aren't you? But nonetheless, we were there in the back row, trying not to be conspicuous, not to stand out and disturb the people. But then the bride or groom's father came out with a box, and he gave it to the priest. And then the wedding couple came in and went up and got married there in the cathedral. And so I was easily able to figure out that was most likely the donation for the wedding, to thank the priest in advance. Because that's, it's for services rendered. But the temple, no. The temple president, all the temple patrons, they're free. They're forced. They're volunteer service. None of them get paid. It's a mission for the temple president. They're members of the 70 who are retired from the 70 and then get called to be temple presidents or mission presidents. Or a mission president is one who can get recruited into the 70, and then when they retire, they can become temple presidents or temple sealers. That's tradition in the church. And so there is no payment for them. This is another thing that Mormons are not catching on to. Government is not aware of. In Christianity and in other religions, they have to survive on the donations of the people. That's why these mega churches and stuff have to make money somehow, and they've let it go to their heads. It's not about the people, it's about being popular with priestcraft. But this church, it's all lay ministry until you get to the corporate board. It's the corporation. Section 119. And so the money of tithing to go to the temple, where everybody works there, is free missionary service, temple service. Nobody gets paid, except for the janitors and the people who work in the kitchens, but they're doing away with those. Cafeterias. And the groundskeepers. But the actual workers themselves, the sealer, does not get paid. There is no money needed to pay the sealer. And thus, the church demanding you pay for your wedding, it's a crime. And so every single government leader, Cox is the executive. He's supposed to enforce the laws. And yet he's guilty of violating the laws. He's a victim of the church, criminalizing him. Because the church as a criminal operation is making Mormons criminals. Because Cox, being the man, is paying for his prostituted wife. He's only allowed to have sex with her. She was given to him by the church because she's Mormon. Just like prostitutes, they belong to the pimp. And these prostitutes will often get branded with a tattoo to show that they are owned by the pimp. And so the underwear is a symbol of your sexual bondage to the church, with the brandings of the marks on the underwear, which have come from Freemasonry, but nonetheless. That's what it all means. When you're on the altar, you have to give the second token of the Melchizedek priesthood, the patriarchal grip or sure sign of the nail. This is far worse than the Handmaid's Tale. And so all Mormons in government are involved in this. The church has corrupted everybody. And so the Attorney General race, now that we're at the end of the video, is Derek Edwin Brown, who won. He's a Republican, and so he's against porn, but he's prostituting his wife. He is from Camarillo, California. He married Emily de Azevedo Brown. Not Brown, Emily de Azevedo. And so, yeah, every Mormon knows who Lex de Azevedo is. I knew him from going to, especially for youth, at BYU during the summer times in August, every year during my teen years. Parents would make that time to do family vacation trip, as the parents would go and do genealogy with the elderly in the family and dump me, and as the other siblings got old enough, to especially for youth, because they knew I didn't want to go on that kind of a trip. Even though we would stop by Hoover Dam and the dinosaur museum or whatever it is down there, and other stuff along the way, and Circus is where we stayed because that was the safest, family-friendly place. Not the Treasury. I think, aside from my mom as a baby, I think that was the first time that I actually saw. I'm not allowed to see, and it was long before any of the internet stuff. I can't see in magazines. I'm still a kid. But yeah, I was tired, realizing that we're finally arriving at our destination, and I see the billboard sign. So beautiful. Why was that banned from me? Why are everybody saying that that's evil, not the devil? But I'm not that kind of a man. I'm another kind. Am I blushing? Anyway, moving on. And so, his wife, Emily, has, especially for youth, had him, and he would do musical performances as well as some songs on the theme, and so it would be on the cassette tape that they would give us at the end, and so that we can remember the spiritual witness feelings that we had. And okay, and his daughter, Emily, is from Encino, Los Angeles. And they met at BYU and got married in Utah. Oops. Sex trafficking. You can do this. It is a crime. Despite them being successful, she's famous in and of her own right, doing her thing, even though she's got it from nepotism. She's a nepo baby. But nonetheless, Marion Brown at BYU, sex trafficking. Even though they came from the same state, they traveled out of state to get married and have sex, paying the church. Sex trafficking. You know, and her father and mother, especially for youth, would talk about relationships with us teens, sharing their personal experiences of marriage, courtship. As I'm sitting in that audience all by myself, going to the dances. Nobody wants to dance with me. So yeah, I would eventually learn to avoid those kinds of talks and select the second coming stuff. Yep. So yeah, this is the scandal that is Utah Mormon. And it's sad because everybody thinks that this is a good life, not realizing that everybody's being extorted. And that's what makes me just break down and cry, because those escort services of high school girls, those high school girls keep it a secret. And they're Mormon. And they tell their bishops they're worthy. They don't let their parents know. They don't let their peers know. Then they go on missions, naughty girls. They go on to college. You know, Rick's college had the red light district. Didn't fully understand. I sort of knew because of Roxanne. You don't have to put on the red light. But I preferred Lady Red Light. Which is about prostitution. And so yeah, Rick's college had girls who were prostituting themselves so they could pay for Rick's college. I'm sure it's being done here at BYU, as I see the YouTube videos about, I think it was Zelf on the Shelf. They came out with a video not too long ago about how BYU students are involved in this secret sex scandal. I was told back in high school at church in the Aaronic priesthood classes about how BYU students got caught because they thought that they could go on the weekend down to Las Vegas, get married at the Elvis Temple Chapel. I think he has that song. Elvis. See if I can find it. And then have sex for the weekend. And then before they come back to BYU, they get an annulment. Then they go back to BYU, and nobody's the wiser. That's why moonlighting last night really hurt. As, you know, obviously she knew that David played around, slept with lots of women in his life. But she came to learn that while working with her, he had stopped it. He was changing his life because of her, and she didn't see it. She was constantly berating him and complaining and arguing because she didn't approve of him. And it was because she had a crush on him. But he needed to change in order for her to accept him for who he is. And so then the Mark Harmon, not Hoffman, episodes here near the end of season 3 was disturbing, because she talks about how David's assumed lifestyle that is still going on, and it isn't, is disapproving. And then all of a sudden she breaks character to say that she had desires to have stranger sex. And so, yeah, that is deeply concerning. You know, safe sex does not mean putting your life in danger. And then that guy comes back from her childhood, and she sleeps with him. And even though he's a good guy, he's an astronaut. It's before he became an NCIS agent. Which, this could be why I didn't like Mark Hoffman's character, because of this and some other stuff that I'd seen of him where he's the villain. And so when I began watching NCIS, I was not wanting to watch it because of him, because of his previous acting jobs. But then as I began to watch it, and certain female cast members, I went, wow, this is pretty good. They killed her off. Kate, no. But she wanted to quit. So they killed her. And then she went and did Rizzoli and Isles. But, oh, that hurt. It's just, I'm gonna bawl. I know, yeah, Ziva, Zeba, they switch off on the phone names because it's Hebrew. And then Bishop. Well, but then getting rid of Gibbs ruined it. I had to get season 21 just because it's a money trap. I mean, yeah, I caught the TPS report joke. But I was expecting Gibbs to come back, and he had no intention of coming back. He was only there as a producer to keep people watching the show. And then they did other spin-offs, Hawaii and some other stuff. But nonetheless, Hawaii I would like to get interested in. I understand it's now over after 3 seasons. Anyway, you can't do that to me. You can't mess with my emotions. But yeah, it's, if you love a guy, you don't cheat on him before getting into a relationship because you didn't have the courage to tell him. And so, yeah, that's what you see here with Utah culture. You've got the secret lives of Mormon housewives, got the BYU scandals, you got the regular teen scandals, and the sex trafficking and the prostitution that's going on outside of the church's realm. Everybody's keeping it a secret. And then you add to it all the rapes that happen here. Just enough to just bring me to collapsing in tears. All because of the church that is leading this criminal operation in Utah. Whereas I'm not sure if there are anybody who hasn't been tainted with the physical part of it. Because obviously the financial part, everybody's tainted. And it's just awful. It's just soul crushing. And so, yeah, the Attorney General is compromised. If he tries to arrest somebody for prostitution, if somebody's smart enough as a defense lawyer and not Mormon who's also compromised, let alone the prosecutor, there can be no justice when everybody's compromised and have to recuse themselves, that they themselves are guilty of the crime. The only solution is to take down the source, and that's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They have to be shut down and end, dissolved, permanently, forever, so that all Mormons know it, that all the world knows it, so that if anybody dares try to resurrect it from the grave of hell, that it will be immediately spotted and shut down before it begins, before it gets a foothold again. And until that day happens, no Mormon is free. And so yes, this is why the month of Kislev is so important, as it is the final year of the latter days. With the abomination of desolation of the Greeks, and the setting in order of the temple to free Mormons from the bondage. And it's just sad that Mormons become enemies to defend it rather than getting upset with the church for causing it.